Hi, everyone. You may have noticed in the prayer minutes that I offer that I often turn to poetry for prayer. Though it might not seem an obvious choice at times, poetry as prayer is deeply rooted in our faith. The Bible is full of poetry, not the least of which are the Psalms. The Psalms have been prayed for millennia across time and space. But truth be told, there is just something about poetry that speaks to me. Even poetry that doesn't appear to be overtly religious in nature feels prayer-like to me, like words engaged in an intricate dance that long to reveal something more, something real, something true. Poetry can do this in literal ways, though it can also do so in more abstract and opaque ways. And I think that's perhaps why poetry is sometimes difficult. Meaning is slippery, and that can be uncomfortable. Now, of course, I couldn't talk about poetry today without sharing an actual poem, so I'd like to offer this one today by the famous Australian poet Les Murray. This poem is entitled Poetry and Religion. Religions are poems. They concert our daylight and dreaming mind, our emotions, instinct, breath, and native gesture into the only whole thinking, poetry. Nothing's said till it's dreamed out in words, and nothing's true that figures in words only. A poem, compared with an arrayed religion, may be like a soldier's one short marriage night to die and live by, but that is a small religion. Full religion is the large poem in loving repetition. Like any poem, it must be inexhaustible and complete, with turns where we ask, now why did the poet do that? You can't pray a lie, said Huckleberry Finn. You can't poe one either. It's the same mirror. Mobile, glancing, we call it poetry. Fixed centrally, we call it religion. And God is the poetry caught in any religion, caught, not imprisoned. Caught as in a mirror that he attracted, being in the world as poetry is in the poem, a law against its closure. There'll always be religion around while there is poetry or a lack of it. Both are given and intermittent as the action of those birds, crested pigeon, rosella parrot, who fly with wings shut, then beating, and again shut. There's much to say about this poem, more than can be said in this video. There'll be a link to the poem in case you'd like to read it too, down in the description. So I'll just focus on a couple of things. Former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, has commented on this poem in his book, A Century of Poetry, 100 Poems for Searching the Heart. In it, he says this: Murray begins by telling us what religions actually do. They bring together all our diverse levels of thinking and imagining and all our ingrained habits of negotiating the world around us. And in doing this, they show themselves as essentially poetic. And this in turn tells us something about poetry, that it is not simply an arrangement of words. It is part of an engagement with truth that must extend beyond the words alone, yet the words are still crucial. That last comment from Williams feels like it really resonates with our Anglican tradition, a tradition that is rooted in common prayer. What if we said this instead? The Book of Common Prayer is an engagement with truth that must extend beyond the words alone, yet the words are still crucial. I think that statement captures something essential. And as an extension, I think Murray's poem helps us to say that in that sense, the Book of Common Prayer is religious, and as such, it is poetry. But also the opposite. The Book of Common Prayer is poetry, and as such, it is religious. But of course, it's not really the book itself, is it? It's the liturgies it enables and the people of faith that it enlivens. That too is poetic. Okay, I feel as if I'm veering off into the opaque a bit, so let me say something a bit more concrete about why I chose this poem today. I hear this question asked a lot. In fact, I ask it a lot myself. What are people looking for? We live in a tumultuous world, and it's easy to say that people are looking for answers in the midst of all that. Concrete answers, perhaps. And I don't want to suggest that our tradition doesn't offer answers. It does. I hope that everything we do points people to Jesus. But answers held on to too tightly can turn brittle and dissolve into dust, slipping through our fingers like sand. Murray's poem offers us a corrective. What if we viewed our approach to that question a bit differently? What if we thought, what am I looking for? What if our strategy for growth wasn't providing concrete answers like a product, but an invitation into a space where we join our questions with the questions of others in a spirit of empathy and honest engagement? What if we saw ourselves as what Murray calls the large poem in loving repetition, where the openness and uncertainty of questioning are met with a liturgy shaped by love? What if, in the spirit of poetry, we leaned into the weird and the mysterious instead of shying away from it or trying to clean it up, explain it away? What if we saw following Jesus? What if we saw discipleship as writing poetry instead of developing programs? My wonderings are sincere, and when I offer my next word for the week in August, I'll have more to say about how we'll be exploring these kinds of things together in the coming year. But to end on a more personal note, if you're wondering yourself about how you might engage poetry in your prayer life, or maybe you're just looking for a different way to pray these days, but you don't know where to start, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Please reach out, and we'll begin our work together. Thanks for spending some time with me today.